He's in charge of our life. There we go.
There we go.
Thank you. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission of Tuesday, April 6th, 2021. And first on our agenda is approval of the minutes for the regular Planning and Zoning Commission meeting of Tuesday, March 2nd.
So moved.
I just have a couple of typos, Dave, not nitpicking.
Is that what typos
Okay.
are?
On the Ruckman. So the 1, 2, 3, the fourth paragraph down, Mr. Mullen stated they did not object.
Okay,
Oh, that's kind of important.
And then
yeah,
current, and then I think the third line down, you meant to say currently.
okay,
That's it.
thank you.
Okay, very good.
So those changes, I'll move approval if anybody didn't already.
I did, but it's okay. You take it. I'll second.
All right.
Mr. Broom,
Yes.
sorry. Mrs. Burke,
Yes.
Mr. Deacon,
Yes.
Mr. Steinbring,
Yes.
Mrs. Sog,
Yes.
Mrs. Turner.
Yes.
Next, I'd like to adjourn the regular meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission and convene a meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals.
So moved.
Second,
Who made the motion? I'm sorry.
I did. Can you hear me?
Sally,
Yes, who seconded?
Sandra,
I did.
Okay,
no?
Mr. Broom,
Yes.
Mrs. Burke,
Yes,
Mr. Deacon,
Yes.
Mr. Steinbring,
Yes.
Mrs. Sog,
Yes.
Mrs. Turner.
Yes.
All right, first on our agenda of the Board of Zoning Appeals is the detached accessory structure side yard variance request for the sign, I hope it's sign, residence at 2000 Woodstock Road, or it's cosign, I guess. And no humor is allowed, I know. Mr. Glavak?
Yes.
Are you here to present for them, or are they going to present for themselves?
I'm speaking for the Mary Sign, the owner.
Thanks, Bill. Go ahead.
Oh, yep, we're the residents lost a garage the same size as what we're proposing to replace it with due to a tree falling on it. And the garage was in the backyard, and it's a narrow lot, and it eliminated any backyard that they had to utilize. So we decided to see if we could get the replacement garage placed off to the side to create a little more of a backyard element. And it'll also allow us to straighten up some nasty grade issues that exist right now. And what I did is I scooched the garage back behind the house line, and I also lined it up with a neighbor garage that's approximately 25 feet off the line also. So the two garages would pretty much be back to back. That's it in a nutshell.
So the second garage is behind?
The original garage that got
No. The second one that's 25 feet off.
Oh,
the
that's
lot?
the neighbor's garage to the left.
Okay, so they're
Yeah.
not back to back, they're side to side.
They're
Oh, or am I
Back.
confused?
back to back. The backs of the garages will face each other.
Okay, the
On
way
either
they-
side of a very
Okay,
large
because
private.
they're gonna go in on the side. I get it.
And Dave sent some pictures, so there's a pretty tall fence between the two backs of the garages, is that correct?
Yes, there is, yes.
Do we have any objections from the neighbors?
I did not receive any comments.
Okay, anyone else have questions?
I just had a question, pretty close to the proposed garage, right in front of it. It looks like it's a sewage, little sewage treatment system there?
That's
Um,
actually quite a ways away.
Is it?
Yes. I would say close to 50 feet.
Okay,
So we're nowhere near any of the septic lines, the lines running to the house. It's a virgin area.
okay,
Yes. And it also is far enough, we hope, from all of the big trees. We shouldn't have an issue with damaging a tree.
okay.
Scott?
Yeah.
Oh, did someone else? have a
Yeah,
question?
Nancy, I just have a quick question. So that's basically a 15-foot variance from the 40 that's needed. And I'm just wondering, is it possible for the garage to be slid? I guess that would be further north by 5 or 10 feet or more, and then maybe only it's a 5 or a 10-foot variance. I mean, it looks like there's quite a bit of room there between where the existing drive is and where the garage is going to go, along with the extension and kind of that apron that pulls in there into the garage.
Actually, there isn't a lot of room to wiggle a vehicle into the garage. It's rather tight. It may not look like it on the print, but literally, he's going to have to pull his truck up forward and basically back it in the garage. It's tight.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Like I said, the neighbor's garage, I did my best to try and measure how far that was off the line without trespassing, and it appears to be about the same 25 feet.
Thank you. Okay, Scott, do your magic.
Okay, and also this garage, so was the old garage facing the street or?
It was a little, it was facing the street. It was sort of half behind the house and half not. It was a little bit of a skewed angle.
Okay.
I think one of the pictures shows some of the garage slabs still there.
Okay. But because I think, don't the building ordinances prefer to have the garage door not facing the street?
My
This one
garage
is
is not
It's
facing
facing north.
It won't.
Yeah, this one, right, so this one won't,
That's a good
where the
thing.
other one was.
That's a good
Yes.
thing. Correct.
That's a
Right,
good
right.
thing.
Plus, don't argue.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. So we're actually turning this the right way.
Correct.
Okay, so this is an application for a variance at 2000 Woodstock Road, the sign residence. And so the 7 questions, the first question is the property in question will or will not yield a reasonable return, and there can or cannot be beneficial use of the property without the variance because. So the first thing here is that their existing garage that was on the lot was destroyed by a tree. And this garage, and I believe that we don't have a front yard, backyard issue. This is only a side yard issue.
That's correct.
All right, so it's going to be located in the rear yard. And this is also going to turn the garage so that the garage door is not facing the street, which was a problem with rebuilding the existing garage, would have had the garage door facing the street. So in some respects, this is an improvement from an aesthetic and appearance perspective. And so in order to have enough room on a fairly narrow lot, this is 142 foot wide lot, to be able to maneuver a car in and out of the garage, a side setback is required. So theoretically, the property could yield a return. So that may be a draw. So the variance is substantial or insubstantial. So here we're replacing a destroyed separate garage. This variance is relatively insubstantial. There's a 25-foot setback that will still be a 25-foot side setback as opposed to a 40-foot side setback. And so a 15-foot variance would be fairly insubstantial given what we're doing here. I think Mr. Glavick also mentioned that this is going to improve some drainage issues here and make a significant improvement to the grading of the house, or the grading of the property. The essential character of the neighborhood would or would not be substantially altered, and adjoining properties would or would not suffer a substantial detriment as a result of the variance because, so here the neighbor's lot has a garage in almost the exact same spot. And for most of the houses on this street, the lots are fairly narrow, and this really would not substantially alter anything. Quite frankly, building a new garage there as opposed to the one that was destroyed would be a benefit to the neighborhood. The variance would not adversely affect the delivery of government services. The applicant purchased the property with or without knowledge of the restriction. So I don't know when the signs purchased it, the side setback used to be smaller. Do we know that?
I didn't know that.
Because we
We
don't,
bought the property 3 years ago.
okay, so.
That was longer ago than that.
Yeah, it was longer ago than that.
Okay.
So, and the applicant's predicament feasibly can or cannot be resolved through some other method other than a variance. So it's been described that by putting it in the back, given the setback of the house, that it would intrude quite significantly on the use of the backyard. So feasibly, could they put it back there? They probably could, but this is going to improve the use of their yard and the use of the backyard. Number 7, the spirit and intent behind the zoning requirement would or would not be observed, substantial justice done or not done by granting the variance. Here, I mean, the overall spirit is to maintain the general character of the neighborhood. And this garage really is not, it's not going to detract from the general character of the neighborhood at all. And so I would move that they, and we've not heard anything from the neighbor, Dave, or we have?
I have heard nothing from the notified neighbors.
Okay. So I would move that we approve a 15-foot side setback variance to allow the construction of the garage as proposed, in the location proposed. I think that's it.
I'll second it.
Scott, Jim seconded. Dave?
Mr. Broom,
Yes.
Mrs. Burke,
Yes.
Mr. Deacon,
Yes.
Mrs. Aug,
Yes.
Mr. Steinbrink,
Yes.
Mrs. Turner.
Yes,
Next on our agenda is a boundary relocation and lot size variance request for the Weitzel properties at 7420 and 7430 Foxborough Road. Tom Murata, are you
Yes,
here?
ma'am.
Oh, there you are.
I'm here, yes. Yeah, I'm representing the Whitesels, obviously, in this. I believe Mr. Whitesel may be attending as
He is.
well.
He's here.
Is he? Okay. And again, we are seeking a variance from the 116301 5-acre restriction because the Whitesels would like to essentially reverse the lot split and consolidation performed a couple of years ago by the previous owners of this property. If you, on the drawing, you'll see is indicated in the recent drawing as B2, and the piece that under question is what is west of the access easement, the roadway or driveway there. And it's a unique situation in that the reason the Whitesels possessed this property is back in 2018, that little piece of land was consolidated, split off from the southernmost property of the prior owner, and it was consolidated with the other portion of B2 in order to meet the 5-acre limit. And at the same time, they would have, under the terms of the access agreement, they would have relocated the access agreement to wind around the back of the property past some gas wells, a very inconvenient and out of the way approach to the Weitzel's residence. So Mr. and Mrs. Weitzel chose to buy the property to preserve it. There is a cottage located on the larger portion that's referred to as the Higbee Cottage. And in addition to preserving their access to their property, preserving the easement, they thought they could use that to have some relatives move in to assist them. They are older, and that plan didn't work out. So they found themselves in a position of owning this property and wanting to sell it. And as Bob can explain if he likes, or if you'd like to hear from him, the problems with selling it primarily have to do with people who are only willing to pay the vacant land price for this property, which would not realize the investment they have in it. They've put almost $600,000 into rehabilitating the Higbee cottage, in addition to $500,000 purchase price and other expenses. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Bob, that comes out to about $1.2 million that you have in the property.
About $1.2 million right now, yes.
So what their concern in buying the property was the access road and the fact that a larger piece of construction there would affect the character of the area, the aesthetics, the woodland and pasture, the view of the woodland and pasture would be broken up by the thing. Now, what he would like to do is to be able to sell the cottage as a property and not just as a construction site, and consolidate the piece south of the access road with his own property, which is 7420 right to the north there. The plans to have relatives reside in the cottage did not work out, and this seems to be the only way they can get anything like a reasonable return is to sell and not hurt the aesthetics of the neighborhood. It would be to proceed in this manner. And Bob, if you have anything you'd like to add to that, I guess now's the time.
We bought a empty lot per the previous sellers, who demonstrated to us that they were going to demolish the Higbee cottage. And getting an architect involved, we said, with that 5-acre piece, the only place to put it would be across our easement, and we'd have to relocate. But in our current house, we'd be looking at the back of maybe a 6,000, 7,000, 8,000, 10,000 square foot house. And we destroy the whole vista and the way the area was built up. So our approach was to restore the cottage and make it available to family members who help us out. And they did help us in the construction, which they did an excellent job of restoring it. But all we want to do now is basically take the 2 acres that was originally tacked onto that piece and move it off, and rather put it to the farmer owners, just put it on to 7420. So actually we're just restoring everything to its original situation for 40 some years.
And that's essentially it. There's no substantial change here. It's going back to the status quo as it was before the 2018 lot split. I think that, as I said, there's no hope of a reasonable return on the investment without such a change. And the whole goal of this is to preserve the essential character of the neighborhood. So we'd ask for the variance that would allow him to make this move.
I have a question. Have you had an appraisal of the property both ways? The Higbee Cottage property, what do you call it, B2?
We have not had a formal appraisal, but we had it listed for 1.5 years. at a price of about $1 million. And everyone came back and said it was too expensive. And we did get an offer of $650,000 because that owner said, you have 5 acres. It's worth about, acreage is worth 50,000. And we'll give you 600,000 for your house. So here's 650,000 for the 5 acres and the Higby Cottage restored. And of course, we said no because we had about $1.2 million at that point. So we said the good move is to reduce the size of the property so we could put up to a price that was reasonable. And we have a local real estate person who will, if we get approval here with your condolence, with your approval, we would list it, and his suggestion is 785,000, which we can live with because we would be taking the 2 acres, 200,000 off of the whole cost side of it. We'd still be losing a lot of money, but we can live with the loss rather than where we are with the 5 acres there and not being able to sell it because we've had dozens of people go through it. And they all said the same thing: too much property, too big, great location, love the location, great property, too expensive. Just so we said, reduce the size of the lot. Now we've had 3 people come through without putting it out there, just because we said okay to the local real estate person because they wanted to see it. And there was no mention of the price. They thought the price was reasonable at $785. And if we could do this, it would really make our lives, for Dean and I, much more stress-free at this point.
I guess I'm trying to get at whether the property is really worth, whether you had an appraisal to say whether the property was really worth less with the 2 acres gone. That's all I asked the question for.
Yeah, if somebody said they were gonna pay $785 with 3 acres of property, but the best offer you got was $650 with 5 acres of property, I don't understand that. Why would somebody pay more with 2 acres less property?
Oh, that would,
Go ahead.
yeah, that would, the property would have this restored structure on it, the cottage, which has been renovated with high quality materials. So they'd be buying that. I think the people looking at buying 5 acres, their intent would be to tear down the cottage and build something else much larger.
Right, but my understanding is that the cottage has historic value. So our historic commission and our architectural board of review would have to approve that, which I doubt very much could happen here in this village.
Well, we do know that the prior owner, at least Bob has relayed to me, actually had a demolition order for the cottage when she listed the property. I don't know if that's
But
accurate.
that was before it was renovated.
Well,
Now the cottage is renovated.
yes.
So that's a whole different situation. The cottage was falling down, which I know that Weitzel's did an amazing job redoing it. We're just trying to get at whether it's really worth less with 2 acres less. It's not, you heard us go through our requirements in order to grant a variance. So we're trying to understand the basis that we might justify a variance in this situation.
Well, with regard to the reasonable return, I think at least the prospect of ready, willing, and able buyers that the realtor has brought indicates that the people who are looking at the cottage are willing to pay, I think, a fair price for it, but they're not willing to pay for the extra property. The people, on the other hand, the people who are looking at it as turning it into vacant land, whether they think they can get away with that or not, aren't willing to pay for the cottage. And I think by splitting off the 2.5 acres and consolidating it with the Weitzel's current property, that gives them some opportunity to at least increase the value, if for no other reason, by having more acreage on their current property, and at some point realize a more reasonable return than they could simply by selling the whole thing as vacant land.
No. Okay, any other comments from the commission?
Tom, did you mention that the Weisels were gonna move their access?
Had the prior owners sold it as 5 acres and the construction of a larger structure were put on the property, under the agreement for the access route, the prior owners had the power to relocate the easement.
Okay.
And it would have, I'm not sure exactly how it would have gone. It would have gone around the back of the property and approached from another angle. And according to architects that Bob has talked to, any larger structure would have to be placed such that it would basically be sitting on top of the current easement.
Right.
But Bob owns both the properties, so he could make that easement so that it couldn't be changed.
I think now he could. At the time he bought the property, he did not have
But
that.
he could do that now.
Well, and I guess the advantage of the lot split is that for sure that parcel B2, there's no question about another house being built there or this one being torn down and another one being built.
Well, if the easement were such that it couldn't be moved, that also would stop there being any building on top of the easement.
Okay.
Right, because
By the
right
way, I
now,
just got a text from Emily. She had her shot yesterday and she's not feeling well.
Oh,
because
She agreed with the signed property.
Sandra, I mean, on that, I mean, even if someone could still build another house on B2, I mean, that's, I mean, if it's a lot, right?
I don't know what,
They could add on to the Higbee cottage, I suppose.
Right.
well, okay, so you're saying, Scott, because it's an existing lot, they could, even if it was less than 5, somebody could tear down the house and build another one?
It would be difficult for the village to stop that because there'd be no beneficial use or economically viable use of that parcel if it's in separate ownership. So a variance to build a house there would probably be warranted. I can't say that for sure, but most likely.
well, one of the Weitzel's concerns was that if something goes up there, I mean, there's pasture lands, there's woodlands, the vista, as Bob pointed out earlier, is unique and it would substantially change the character of the area, he believes.
I'm very sympathetic to this, but I'm looking at this and I mean, this looks like this looks a lot like it's purely a financial thing. And we're looking at agreeing to take a conforming 5-acre lot and split it down to 3.188 acres. And I that gives me pause because for purely a financial reason, I could see other people wanting to do the same thing. And I'm that 5-acre minimum lot requirement is really key and very important to the remaining parcels in the village that are larger
Turn your
than
phone
that.
on, Scott, you're breaking up. You have to turn your
Oh.
phone away from your computer.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Move
mean,
your
it's,
phone away from the computer.
say again, Nancy?
Breaking up. You have to move your phone away. Whatever, go ahead.
Oh, well, I'm talking to my microphone right here.
It
so-
wasn't breaking up on my end.
Yeah, I think it's your end breaking up, Nancy.
It's mine?
Yeah, you were breaking up.
Okay.
I mean,
Hey,
so,
Scott,
yeah,
if I,
go ahead.
if I could, jump in, and I agree with you. I'm very sympathetic to this, and there's no doubt a lot of people in the village and a lot of residents have put more money into their house than what the market at any given time may be willing to pay for that. We have the same issue, just down the street here on County Line. And the property sold for probably what it was worth in the current market environment. And I remember being at the meeting in 2018 when this lot got cleaned up and we were above 5 acres. And so the job to try to get some of these smaller parcels to conforming uses and being cleaned up, so to speak. And I really struggle with taking what is now a conforming lot to being a non-conforming lot strictly for the purpose, of what's unfortunate is that, a resident or homeowner has got more money in than what the market is willing to recognize at this point in time. And I just question and I struggle with, is that the role of this group is to be able to attempt to solve those types of issues.
I just was questioning whether it could be done a different way with making the easement such that they couldn't build on the easement. So there would be no chance, even at 3 point whatever, 1.8 or whatever it is, someone could enlarge the Higbee cottage, assuming they got architectural and historic approval. If someone wanted to do that.
Right, but Bob's got the easement, so he could, the new owner
He
could come
can
in.
change it. Right,
Right, and he would say, no, I'm staying where it's at.
right.
I'd only add that.
Pat, am I right on that?
Yeah,
So I'd view that as that, that wouldn't be an issue of something else going in there because
Yeah,
Bob would
I-
just be able to say, I'm not going to grant a change in where the easement is.
I assume that setbacks can be met, these things, required setbacks.
With the,
Could be
with
very
the,
With an addition on the cottage. I think that was your question, Nancy.
correct.
Mhm.
I'm concerned that as it sits right now, without any other factor or feature in the request, that it's purely a financial, we've got too much money in it. We need to abandon the 5 acre minimum zoning because of that. And
Now,
I'm looking for something else is
if I might, I'm sorry.
What about, and maybe, what about the driveway? I mean, never mind. Go ahead. I withdraw my question.
I mean, it is a unique situation because he bought it to prevent, among other things, in addition to the easement, a change in the character of the whole neighborhood, putting a large house there. I understand it would block the view from his, I'm sorry, is that you, Bob?
No,
Okay. It would block the view. It would change the nature of the area. He was some sort of, and I know this doesn't really speak directly to the law, but he was sort of forced into buying the property to protect the aesthetics in addition to the easement and the nature of the area around there. I haven't heard anything that any neighbor has objected to this. And again, the situation has only existed for a couple of years. I know it's a conforming lot now, but for 40 some years it hadn't been. And I think it would benefit Bob. I don't think it would do anybody any harm. And it simply puts things back to the status quo. So I don't think it is an unreasonable request at this point, and we certainly ask you to consider it seriously.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
are there any citizens that want to speak?
I was just going to ask that question if all the commissioners
All right,
have spoken.
thank you.
Anybody on the commission that hasn't had a chance to say something that they want to say, Jim?
I was still puzzled, and paragraph B, the second paragraph in the letter, it's that in contrast, the requested area variance would allow them to sell the cottage with less land, which would allow them to recover a greater portion of their investment. That just didn't make sense to me. I understand you want to protect the aesthetics, and by making it a smaller lot, that may in fact help. But I think the fact that he has the 30-foot wide easement, that also is good protection.
Chad, let me ask you, are you finished, Jim?
Yes.
I have a question too.
Wait, just a minute, Sandra. I want to ask you about Sally. She's an adjoining property owner. Does she have any issue with regard to this?
Well, generally, abutting property owners do have an interest in the matter.
So should she recuse her? I was going to call on her, but I want to
That-
call
that
on her
would-
in
that
that capacity rather than as a commissioner.
I think that would be up to Ms. Burke and the applicant, and whether the applicant has any objections.
I don't think it's, we're a very long way away from the Weitzel's property. We sit up on the top of the hill, and our property runs a lot of our acreage is down over the hill and touches the Weitzel's property back where the Burton barn used to be. So what happens with their house or the Higbee house doesn't really affect us as such. We're not contiguous, so we don't see the Weitzel property as such, nor do we see the Higbee property.
Thank you, Sally. Did you have anything further you wanted to comment?
No, guess not.
Okay, I know there are a number of adjoining property owners on the call. So if any of you would like to speak, you're more than welcome. We'd love to have your comments.
Hi, this is Kendra Howley. I live next door to Sally. So I agree with Sally's response. We're uphill from these properties on Foxborough. So, you know, it's down the hill. We wouldn't be able to see the properties, or if the homes were to change. I'm still struggling to follow when you can go beneath a 5-lot acreage, but that's for you all to decide. But it seems from me, no issue.
Chip?
You have to unmute, Chip.
All right, trying to find an unmute button. We do see the property from our house. We are up the hill. And if it did become a 10,000 square foot house, we would see it, but I don't know that that would be particularly onerous on us. So I guess I'm observing, and I guess I'm still curious why changing a lot from 5 acres to 3 acres lessens the possibility of a mega mansion, assuming there's no historical issue. But I missed that as I'm listening, why going from 5 to 3 reduces the likelihood of a 10,000 square foot house.
You mean is it's still a buildable lot, right?
Right.
True.
Is it worthwhile to kind of pursue the idea of this being a historical property and being renovated, that it couldn't be destroyed?
Well, I think we also have one more property
Oh,
owner.
sorry.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jack Koch. I would say this probably affects me the most. We're in the
You're right down there.
we're in the Ottmans. We recently purchased the Ottmans home, so the Foxborough is our driveway as well, and so basically where the JPK Chesterton is my property. I don't have any problem with this. I think obviously the issue that you all are struggling with from a financial perspective is certainly for you all to decide. Frankly, I would rather not have a mega mansion that I'm staring at. So I think it behooves me to not have the larger parcel. So we would be in support of what you all, of making it a smaller property, but certainly move to you all to make the decision on moving from a 5 to 3.8.
Go ahead, Sandra.
If the major concern here is about protecting, the vistas, the tradition of the property, given the fact that the Higby Cottage has been renovated, and if that changes the status from it once being able to be demolished to now not being able to be demolished, it seems to me like that would be a pretty significant piece of information, because if that's the case, then if it's 3 or 5 acres, it couldn't be destroyed. And I guess it could always be added on to. I don't know what the likelihood of that is, but is that a piece of information we should try to get before we make a decision?
Karen, do you have any comment on that?
Well, I think we gave permission, Dave will correct me if I'm wrong. I think we
you're
gave
probably muted.
Permission to tear down some garages. I don't think we gave permission for the Higby Cottage to be torn down.
Okay.
There were some garages at that reconfiguring time. My question is for Todd, what would this do as an example for other properties? Because we have a lot of properties where people own 2 properties right next to each other, and there's maybe a house on one and a house on the other. And what does it do to our zoning?
It would be a precedent that we might have to deal with in a similar situation. I guess that's all I can say. That the cases on zoning in Ohio for years have said, well, you've got to look at the specific property, and perhaps precedent doesn't always prevail, but in this situation, I could see where it could cause an issue going forward, particularly in Gates Mills with some larger properties and wanting to split off something smaller.
Especially going backward.
Yeah.
Well, especially if they put up a house on a larger property and then want to make the parcel they split off smaller. I mean, they can make the house while they're still owning it.
Well, and we have a lot of houses on 2.5 acre or smaller lots that they're mega mansions, if you will, now.
Right.
So
yeah. If the goal is to control the size of the house, can't the owner put a deed restriction on any size parcel to limit the size of the house and or mandate that the existing cottage be kept or only added onto at a future date? I mean, that could be control. If he owns the property, he can control that in the future.
Well, Chris, that's my question. I look at this as if it's and Bob, I mean, no disrespect at all, but if the only issue is to bail out the property owner financially, I'm nervous that we would be setting a bad precedent that would allow someone later to come back when we said no and say you're being arbitrary in this circumstance. If there were more to it, like Chris was saying, if we did something else that helped preserve the aesthetics there and did something more than just splitting off the lot because the buyers don't want to carry the extra cost of the extra 2.5 acres on their tax duplicate, then maybe that would give us a reason to distinguish this from other situations in the future.
Let me point out that the 2 acres is being added to my existing property, and that makes my existing property more valuable. So I take the value on 7420, but this whole thing is to try to maintain the existing easement in, the existing look and feel, the cottage, keep it restored and historical. And we went to great lengths to research and research and research. And at this point, it's just all about getting the right buyer in who can afford this. If he can afford, it's not about, I don't need the money. I don't need the money. This is not financial. To me, it's the easement and the look and the variance. I just don't want a huge big house there. And we have great neighbors, who love them, would like to keep this going and maintain it that way. And I think that this is a way to do that. And I'm absorbing a big part of this, and I can absorb all the loss. It doesn't bother me. I just want to make sure we get a good group of people in there so I don't have to continue to maintain it. I've got to make sure it's insured, watered, landscape, take care of. I got to get somebody in there to own it and take care of it properly. And that's all I'm trying to do, and maintain the whole area like it was when we moved in there 20 years ago. I've been in the village for 30 years, pretty much right in the same neighborhood. And I'd like to keep it just like it is.
I guess what we're charged with, Bob, and we mean no offense to you, this is all about the zoning code. And one of the issues that we have to answer, and Scott will go through the list, is whether this could be accomplished in a manner that didn't require a variance. And that's why I asked about changing the language in the easement so that that was a permanent easement and could not be changed unless there were agreement of the property owners, I guess. So
Well-
that's what I'm trying to figure out, is whether that was why I asked Todd about whether that easement could be made such that no house could be built down there, which is what Bob doesn't want, a mega mansion facing his property. And it seemed the answer was yes. So that would allow that to happen without changing our code, compromising our code in any way. And that is what I think you hear the discussion. That is what we're worried about.
Yes, I understand that completely. But here's the bottom line. We looked at this every conceivable way we could think of with good lawyers, architects, and others. And for the last year and a half, dealing with potential buyers of all kinds to go in and if he buys 5 acres, he may want to do much more than just keep the cottage there. And so that would, I say you can't do that because we got to keep the easement in. So that winds up with him buying 5 acres that he can't use. So that buyer is going to go away. And I just think it makes it so much more difficult to put those restrictions in. And we're trying to find an easy way to maintain a status quo and keep it like it was for the last 40 years. And I really appreciate Jack Coates and his comments, because this impacts all of us down here. And I think this is the right thing for the village, the right thing for us. And it's not about the money, it's about trying to maintain the village image and feel. If we want to put a restriction on the 3 acres that you can't do something else with it, okay, fine, that might work, but I don't see how, and I'm paying for 5 acres and not being able to use it is going to encourage anybody to buy the property.
Would a deed restriction also affect the marketability of that parcel?
I'm sorry, again? I didn't understand.
I'm just throwing that issue out. If there was a deed restriction placed on the 3.18 acres, that would also negatively affect the marketability of the property, I would think, the saleability of the property.
I would think it'd have less effect, because if all they want is the 3 acres and the cottage, that won't make any difference to them. I'm willing to take that chance because I want a good neighbor in there.
I think there has been we have seen in the past, other purchasers that don't want, they want to go with the minimum amount of land they can get away with. But no one has ever asked to go below 5 acres. Someone has a 7-acre property. They want to add 2 to the neighbor and have a 5. And so if we're looking at this, and this is it's just, and I'll use an analogy, a red ball, and I'm going to buy a red ball. And then the next person or I'm trying to sell a red ball. The next person says, I'm going to sell a red ball. Trying to find some way to make this a red ball with stripes and maybe a polka dot on it. So that the next guy that has a red ball, when he comes and says, hey, I want to do the same thing the other guy did, we can say, nope, you just have a red ball. It doesn't have stripes and it doesn't have polka dots on it. And Madam Chair, if I'm speaking out of line, please tell me. I'm trying to find something more that we can do to make sure someday we don't have a bunch of people lined up with red balls saying you got to do the same thing for me.
Well, I think we just heard from the law director that we have a problem. So that's what I'm concerned about. So.
Because everything that Bob has said, that Jack has said about keeping the aesthetic, I don't think there's anybody here. Raise your hand if you're not all for that.
We're all for it.
Right. We're all for it. And keeping things exactly how they are. But we're trying to find a way to do it without jeopardizing other places.
And we think there are possibilities that you could do that. And that's what we're looking at.
Yes.
If there is an option to do it a different way that doesn't compromise the zoning code, we are a lot more comfortable.
I'm willing to listen to any kind of resolution you have, so we get a good neighbor in there, and I don't have to continue to maintain the property as if I owned it.
We understand that completely, but now you have some people who are interested. The market is very different now from when you started. There's not a lot on the market, and people are buying things at premiums. So it seems like you ought to be able to sell that property either way.
Is there any precedent for adjourning this to let us explore some of these?
Absolutely. We could certainly table this to another meeting. And you can explore how to make this happen in a different way that would satisfy Bob. Bob is a terrific neighbor. He and his wife have been amazing contributors to the village. Jean has been tremendous over the years. So we are very conscious of their position in the community. It is not for wanting not to, we want to help them, but we have a bigger problem here, if you understand, Tom. It isn't that we don't want to be accommodating to the Weitzel's. That's the problem.
Yeah. And I think specifically researching using deed restrictions and then possibly in combination with actually platting a house location and mandating a house location that would be done as a part of any future sale, should the lot even be sold, that would have the ability to control the size of the house, the location of the house, the location of the existing easement, and lock all that stuff in perpetuity so that it wouldn't be compromised by any sale or building on that adjacent lot, should it ever be sold, and using those mechanisms.
Yeah. I mean, we really recommend you look into that kind of getting the easement going.
Is there, would another route be a contribution to the property to the land conservancy?
You mean conserving
that 2 acres?
Well, but leaving it in the 5 acres.
Leaving it in the 5 acres.
That's another option. That's a good suggestion, Sandra. I don't know if that would help or not. But I agree with you, Tom, that we should table this so that you can do further exploration. And we don't want to create
we're trying to help. We're all
Yeah,
trying to
we're
help.
trying to help, but we
Thank you very
don't
much.
think we're going in that the direction that you want to go in with this request. That's what I'm hearing from the commission.
Well, I appreciate that very, very much. I appreciate what you're trying to do, Nancy. It's just, we've been at this now for over 2 years, and we've had a lot of experience with the buyer's market and the real estate people having out over years, with everybody has an idea, but anything that'll work and protect the village, I don't want to create a problem for the village at all. If we can compromise some way, we'll certainly do that.
Well, let's agree to table this then. Do I hear any objections? And you can come back whenever you want, or you may not need to. Is there any further business?
Should be a
Do I need
motion,
to have a motion to table that?
either table or continue it to a date certain.
Well, I definitely don't want to continue it to a date certain in case they don't come back. So let's just table it, and then they have the option to withdraw the request if they don't come back. Is that fair? Is that all right, Tom? Bob?
But that's fine.
That's fine.
All right, thank you very much. Dave, we're
We
all
need a
set?
motion, Todd?
Yes, you should have.
I'll move
Second,
table.
I'll second.
Mr. Broom,
Yes.
Mrs. Berg,
yes.
Mr. Deacon,
Yes.
Mrs. Aug,
Yes.
Mr. Steinbrink,
Yes.
Mrs. Turner.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you
I think
all.
we're adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Okay,
This was a very
thanks.
helpful meeting. I appreciate all your time and comments.
Thank you, ma'am.
Great evening.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Happy spring.
Same to you.
Thanks, Tom.